All of us in this room have something in common. We have that same thing in common with people in Florida and people in California and people all across this country and all over the planet. We all wear clothes. There are roughly 8 billion people on Earth. That number is so big, it's hard to comprehend. Here's an even bigger number. There are upwards of 150 billion garments produced each year. And of those, and I'm just speaking about America now, 14 million tons end up in landfills each year. That is a doubling from 20 years ago. It wasn't always this way. How did we get here? So let's go back in time to the decade that I was born, the 1960s. In the 1960s, the average American bought fewer than 25 garments a year. And 95% of those were made in the United States. Now, I'm guessing that some of you might consider yourself not interested in fashion, but even you, if pressed, would be able to describe 1960s fashion. It was iconic. People were stylish with less. Less was more. Fast forward to now, where more has become way too much. Now, the number of items the average American purchases a year has more than doubled to 70 items a year. And the percentage of those made in the United States is now only 2%. Much of the increase in clothing is what we call fast fashion, cheap clothes, in both cost and quality, made by big retailers overseas in response to the latest trends. Fast fashion is not built to last and is often made by petroleum-based fabrics. Again, I ask, how did we get here? We are wearing petroleum on our bodies. I started with the 60s and I jumped to now, but what happened in between? It was in the mid-1970s that big textile mills and factories started to be established overseas in places like Asia and Latin America. They offered incredibly cheap labor, raw materials, and the capacity to manufacture huge orders. In the 1980s, 70% of what Americans were purchasing was still made in the USA. But big retailers like Gap and JCPenney started to work with those overseas factories because it was so much cheaper. In the 1990s, NAFTA happened. The North American Free Trade Agreement removed restrictions and duties on imports and foreign manufactured clothing. Fast fashion was born, and unfortunately, it's still thriving. Fast fashion has created so much over years and years and years. What is happening to it? Where is it all going? So as I said earlier, a lot of it is going into our landfills, but a lot is being donated too. So much so that the excess is being exported to places like the Global South. According to the documentary Textile Mountain, globally, 70% of our donations are baled and shipped to sub-Saharan Africa. Bales are purchased, and the intent is that the items inside will be sold as individual items. But what is inside these bales is that fast fashion I talked about. So it is not sold and it ends up in their landfills and their waterways. So I want us to think about how important the Piscataqua River is to our community, and what we would feel like if it looked like this. And why are we okay with someone else's river looking like this? A recent statistic tells us that there is enough clothing on the planet to clothe the next 6 generations. With that amount of clothing in existence, I want to introduce a reframing of our thinking. Secondhand first. Secondhand first means just what you think it means. It means anytime you go to buy clothing or footwear, you try to buy it secondhand first. If we purchase secondhand first, we can slow the demand for new items to our region and slow the process of items going into our landfill. So why am I talking to you about fashion? Because I love fashion. Fashion is engineering. Fashion is technology. Fashion is art and design. Fashion is communication. Fashion is history. But fast fashion is something else. Fast fashion is harming people and planet. Years ago, I started a blog about sustainable style called Recovergirl. Recovergirl is a play on the brand name CoverGirl with RE added to the front to bring to mind reduce, reuse, and recycle. My interest in sustainable style bled into my work, and while I was working at the local public library, I started an annual clothing swap. It became a hugely popular community event. In 2019, we held our 10th annual clothing swap. It was so much fun. We had a DJ, friends and neighbors were bumping into each other, kids were playing and dancing. That year, 500 people got something secondhand, and it's arguable it caused them not to buy something new. Recently, I read an article in the New York Times. It was an interview with the author of the popular book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer. In it, she said, when we look at environmentalism, so much of it is gloom and doom and finger wagging. But when we look at what it looks like when people take things into their own hands, it's actually joyful. The swap was joyful. It was in that same spirit of joy that I reached out to our local arts organization, 3S Art Space, with a crazy idea. What if we held a sustainable fashion challenge for emerging designers from around New England? It would be our way of elevating talent, building community, and planting the seeds for a future of sustainable fashion in New England. To my surprise and delight, they said yes, and we have been partners on Project Upcycle ever since. For the first 3 years, we partnered with Goodwill Industries of Northern New England. Designers were challenged to upcycle, literally take clothes apart and make a new outfit. The event takes place over 3 days, ending in a live runway show that has been sold out every year, and cash prizes are given to the top 3 designers. The pandemic disrupted the competition, but we took advantage of that break to rethink the challenge. We wanted to be more in conversation with apparel and footwear companies in New England and beyond. So for 2022, we challenged the designers to use excess fabric, dead stock, and samples to upcycle them into a New England streetwear look. These events are hugely successful and a whole lot of fun. And this kind of sustainably minded, joyful work is happening all over. This is Catherine Swanson. During the pandemic, she opened up a fabric store with inventory made entirely of donated fabric, yarn, notions. She is an inspiration. She's very active on social media, and she said something that has stayed with me. She said, "We need to start thinking that what is in our attics and our basements is a natural American resource." And this is Lindsay Esberg. She and her husband, Ryan, resell footwear in Maine under the brand name Rinzy. They have surpassed $1 million in sales. You might think that they would hoard this information of how they figured out how to successfully resell footwear, but they're doing the exact opposite. They're sharing everything they have learned and know because they have seen for themselves the quantity of product that exists, and there are not enough people doing this work. And this is our hometown hero, Emily Stearns. She is the owner of the Drift Collective. Drift is an upcycled clothing store and manufacturer in Portsmouth. Her team of stitchers alter, dye, and mend secondhand clothing for resale. Drift has a prime retail location in downtown Portsmouth, and business is thriving. Secondhand is an opportunity for consumers because we can get something a little bit more affordable and unique. But secondhand and resale is also an opportunity for business, and big business is starting to take notice. Resale, as an industry, is growing and at 5 times the rate of overall commerce. The market for pre-owned goods was $100 billion globally in 2022, and resale is expected to reach $250 billion globally by 2027, making up 23% of retail sales. That was reported in the Business of Fashion just a couple of months ago. Secondhand and resale is forward thinking. Recently, I went shopping at the local Savers, and for those of you who don't know, Savers sells all secondhand items. I was about to turn into the parking lot, and I noticed that the parking lot was packed with cars. And then I looked to the right at our local mall, and I saw a lot more available parking spots. So this got me thinking. What if the mall was filled with secondhand stores? Imagine a store where you could go and buy wedding dresses and suits to be in a wedding or a guest in a wedding. Imagine a department store filled with clean, quality, secondhand kids' clothing. Imagine a chic boutique of secondhand jeans that offered mending and hemming services. Now think beyond clothing. Think of how rich we are with resources that already exist. Musical instruments, camping equipment, sports equipment, tools, toys, furniture, the list goes on. Malls used to be a place of community. I'm guessing some of you have memories, like I do, of having fun hanging out at malls when we were teenagers. They could be that again. Malls and retail spaces could be centers of community and sustainable commerce. Secondhand is forward thinking. I hope we take advantage of this opportunity to invest in ourselves, and I hope we have some fun while we do it. Thank you.